All right, welcome to episode 61 of the PoddyC. This week, we've resurrected Max. Welcome back.
Why'd you guys kill me? You could have just said, like, he's not here.
Yeah,
There was a gun. I saw it.
Yeah. I saw you reacting to the podcast on your stream later as well. That kind of goes crazy, actually. You sort of get a double whammy, right? Like, not only do you not have to show up to record the podcast and, like, you get time that way, you also got free stream content.
I got free stream content. Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, we got, like, double farmed last week, so...
Yep.
Good work there.
Yep.
Okay, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. Obviously, coming up soon is going to be the Race to World First, where you will go up against last week's guest, Hopeful, and a team we haven't had guests from, I guess, probably yet, Method, as they go for the three guilds vie for World First in the Race to World First. What that means for you, dear listeners, is our schedule over the next couple weeks. We're going to try and produce content still, but depending on how crazy things get, we have to cut us some slack. We will do the best we can on that end, and there's a decent chance that one or multiple of us may be in or out of the episodes over the next few weeks. But this week, there is no raid. There is no race to talk about yet. So instead, we have the two new delves, Excavation Site 9 and the Side Street Sluice. Have you guys done the new delves yet?
Do we have to talk about delves? Do you guys want to talk about the car instead?
Okay.
I've got the car owns. We can talk about the delves in a bit, but
I was leaving.
I had a lot of fun with the car.
Yeah, the car is actually kind of fun, although I will say I immediately disconnected upon crashing into a wall with that thing.
Actually, maybe that's the first thing to talk about. I mean, I only played yesterday. I haven't played today yet, but I've heard the servers on both NA and EU are pretty bad.
Yeah. My dude, Tyke. I play on Tichondrius, and there was a solid 30 minutes where every server was up except for Tichondrius, which is good, kind of standard.
That's a good thing, right? Doesn't that just mean the game is popping off right now? Retail is back, or it could just mean that the servers are sucking.
You could be a glass half full or empty person with that, right? Like, I mean, it's possible that like one person is playing the game and it's lagging, right? But you would assume that it's lagging because there are a lot of people playing it. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm always curious. Like, I guess they make some optimizations over, like, they figure out what's causing the lag with the new patch, and it's a combination of, like, there's some things that are making it prone to lag, and there's high demand, right? Because, you know, the demand is still high next week, the week after and stuff, but they iron this all out. Like, I don't think it's one of those cases where they're just having to wait for the capacity to open up, right? I think it's genuinely a case of, like, every new patch, I guess there's just some random different pieces of code that are being problematic that they don't know about until the stress test reveals it or something.
Yeah, I will say,
like, one of the engineers
performance-wise, like, you know, like FPS performance-wise, my performance has been feeling great. Now, I mean, to be fair, I did get a new CPU, and this would be a crazy sponsor segment. But,
that's right.
Yeah,
if you own a CPU company, please, you can bid for the rights to be the company that provided Dorki's silky smooth new CPU.
Even though I'm pretty sure I know which one. I mean, it's like the WoW CPU. I'm assuming.
Was it the new one?
Wait, how'd you get it?
They're more available now at my local micro center.
Oh, okay.
Bleep out where you got that, Trunk. At your local unspecified.
At your local
unspecified.
Bleep that out.
Who
knows where you could have gotten that.
Could have been anywhere. Okay. Yeah, the FPS has been kind of fine for me too, but the lag has definitely been. I'll agree with you, Max. It's like, I would say it's not the worst new patch launch ever, but it's definitely up there on that side of things, which brings us into a discussion. I think this one of the things. So one of the discourses I've seen online over the past day or two has been around, like, why do we have this week on the start of the new patch?
Yeah.
Dude, that's my entire fucking chat. Like, they won't shut up about it.
And there's I think this particular time around has led to that question being asked. I think with it's been, like, brought to the forefront of everybody's minds, because this week you, like, logged in, you opened a vault, and you got an item that was grayed out and couldn't be upgraded. All your crests are gone. All your Valorstones are gone. A bunch of other random stuff is still there, though. You know, you still have your harmonized silks for using the catalyst if you randomly are constrained on that resource, which is hard to be, but if you let it build up, or if you were using it for transmog, you could have been. You still have your undercoins and your restored coffer keys. Those are going to go away next week, but your radiant echoes went away this week. So it's like it's a very weird transition that really highlights like how kind of, I don't know, it feels like not like how
Super
it
complete.
should be, right? Yeah,
Right.
like it feels like a kind of duct tape together seasonal transition that they felt like this in the past, but I think because of the increase in the amount of seasonal systems that they've added over the past like 2 expansions, which have been generally good, right? Like adding in stuff like the upgrade system, which we love, right? It's a great system, but necessarily that leads to more kind of overhead that needs to change from season to season, and not all of them are treated the same way, and it's certainly pretty counterintuitive. Like the fact that this week you're opening up a vault and getting last season gear, and the only content that you can actually do that's like raid or M plus or whatever is still giving last season gear, but then you can't upgrade it anymore, and like all your crests disappeared without notice. I think that has led to a lot of like, it just feels like this isn't how it
Feels outdated.
should be, right?
Yeah, and also it's like a mixture of two different things too. Because like next week, if you guys have been following along, you probably know this. But if you just played last season and have been following along, what happened last season is like there was this heroic week, and then Mythic and Mythic Plus will be after that. Next week, it's all happening at once. So with them taking away that heroic week and then this week not really having anything is like, I wonder if you could mix those two things, right? You could do the heroic week, heroic only at the first week of the patch, and then the second week of the patch is like you can have Mythic and Mythic Plus, basically the same. Like add a little something, or maybe add Mythic Zeros with upgrade with like new gear in this week, or something like that. I started to have this take on my stream where like if you look at the game the way that we look at the game, right? Like most people that we talk to and we know, you're gonna do all the steps of the campaign the day it comes out. So yesterday, done, right? Maybe
Although
you do
notably, it looks like you have to do it on each character, unlike some of the previous seasons where you could skip it. Which
yeah, if you have multiple
kinda
characters, you have to do it on multiple characters. But like, is it, back to like the mole people argument? Is it possible that the reason that this week exists is for a perspective that we do not have, and it's hard to share or relate to? Which is, I think people don't want to feel maybe rushed into doing the raid or Mythic Plus or just start farming content. Like you're officially on a timer, right? Like you can't really enjoy the news. I guess the story of the, again, this is not my thing. I'm just trying to make an argument for someone who's not in this call. That you would do, have some time to do the quest and go farm some stuff and get some new mounts and interact with the new zone and really feel like you can do that without feeling like you have to just start raiding and stuff right away. Maybe that's I would think the argument for it. Like the argument for us, like if you play the game we play it, it's like this week totally doesn't make sense. But I think the reason the week is still there is probably for those people, but I don't, it's just kind of this thing we keep talking about where there's like this large amount of people that don't really have a spokesperson and don't have a lot of like Twitch streamers that are really like that, because those people are all going to do it on the first day, even if they're casual focused, right? Like the people who log in for an hour and do part of the campaign and then log in tomorrow, right? Like, which we assume is the majority of people who play this game.
Yeah, that's 100% why it exists. I mean, it's why time gating exists in this game in general, right? The reason
yeah.
why players aren't allowed to just like instantly get to high item level or instantly be able to unlock AP back in the days. It's to keep the player base a little bit more connected in terms of player power.
So,
But I mean, I will say like they should have at least released M0. It's the same mistake that happened at launch of expansion. Like, why do we not have M0 this week?
I'll give a little bit of a different take on this one because I see myself as a little bit of somebody that's in this space because okay, if you're somebody who's only quest and like if you're a full mole person, you actually don't care as much about when any of the stuff comes out, like what the time the raid and M plus season start, right? Because today you're not like somebody who's pressured by those sorts of things, right? Like existing. And by contrast, if you're a full raid person, you also don't care as much. Like it's just kind of a weird week. I think the reason that this week is nice is for people that are sort of in the middle, right? Where it's like, if you are somebody who, for instance, there's an achievement called Going Goblin Mode that rewards a new warband campsite that you can put as your background for one of your, because that's a new feature with this patch, right? It's like campsites for your guys when they're logged out, right? And that achievement involves like running around and grabbing a bunch of rats from all over the Undermine and like getting a bunch of the treasures, right? Like doing something, if you're somebody who wants to do something like that, but also will play the new content and like will focus on the raid as soon as it's out and focus on the keys as soon as they're available, this is a week that lets you do that. But I definitely don't think there's enough stuff this week to justify that from a pure game design perspective. I think that really, if you look at it, like the biggest reason to me why this sort of week is necessary is like look at the lag, look at the massive maintenance that needs to happen this week and next week, right? Like the more that you are trying to go from one season to another patch and another season all at once, like if you're trying to do not just the new patch, the new story, the new architecture of the game, also the new seasonal content and the new raids and the new M+, the odds that that's going to involve either a massively extended maintenance or things being giga buggy and stuff, I think go way up. So I think that a lot of the value here is mostly just like giving them 2 weeks of resets to where they can kind of do half of it and then do the other half, and then each of them can only be like moderately laggy and, you know, buggy rather than being super bad, especially, you know, because it really doesn't matter, right? Like you think about us yesterday and it's like, oh man, these servers suck. Okay, whatever, right? But if you imagine that's like when the Race to World first started, and it's like NA servers are laggy all day. First of all, Max, obviously you would be incandescent.
I would be in the
right?
shadow
like, that
realm.
would, yeah, exactly. That would be like the worst thing to ever happen to you. But even for non-Race to World first players, right? Like people like to make the argument like, oh, don't design around the Race to World first, but like it sucks for everybody if the game is super laggy, especially, you know, on a new content start. Even if you're a casual player, and you know, obviously it was still laggy yesterday, but it could have been much worse. So I think that's like a lot of what stops them from doing a more elegant season start. But I do think what they need to do for future ones at least is, first of all, it would be good if they could just figure out how to, and we could get, you know, again, just like straight into Heroic Week would be great for most people now. Obviously it'd be super stressful for Race to World first players, potentially, although Heroic Week adds some stress and relieves some other stress. So that, you know, obviously is a mixed bag, but like for most players, I think it would be better, right? Like if you're a story focused player, the fact that the raid is out on Heroic and M+ and stuff, you still probably can do all the story and stuff. Your guild maybe just doesn't raid Tuesday. I think a lot of guilds would just not raid the Tuesday and it would be fine. But I do think that in order for Blizzard to be like comfortable doing that, they would have to, you know, figure it out in a way that is not currently figured out. Which...
Yeah, I just don't even know if you can do that. You know, like I don't think Blizzard would want to make that their public argument. Like the reason we don't want to do this is we're not sure we can release a stable game in one day. Like that's a tough look, right?
Yeah, that's it. So my theory is right that we're never going to get it confirmed because you know it's But what I do think is, okay, failing that, regardless of their reason for doing it this way, I do think that they've got to do it better in future with regards to stuff like messaging about the fact that your crests are going away, for instance, was absent this time around. And if you're somebody who had if you're somebody whose crests got munched by that going away, right, like that feels really bad. So making a more elegant solution at least to that, you know, being super consistent, finding a way to be super consistent about which parts of the season carry over into this dead week and which parts don't, and making it super clear in advance with like a nice big detailed post of like, here's what's happening to this currency, here's what's happening to this currency, would be really, I think that would band-aid a lot of my biggest gripes with the status quo.
I still think they should at least have M0 this week.
Yeah.
Or like what I was talking about at the beginning of the expansion, if they had like maybe normal raid as well, that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah. I think if I'm guessing about the Mythic Zero thing, it's more along the lines of the like casual player argument. Because like if you're only logging in and you're even trying to just get the story done in 1 week, also feeling like you either have daily lockouts on Mythic Plus, like a daily lockout on Mythic Zero would be like,
well, it's weekly
so much
lockout
FOMO.
now, that's why.
Is it weekly? Okay, well if it's weekly, then I feel I completely agree with you if it's weekly. I feel like there is, because like in the first season I think correctly identified that the reason that Mythic Zeros were nerfed from what they already were in Season 4 was purely to make Delves more relevant, which was like the new shiny thing. And in this season, they went back to just how it was before, assuming because Delves just aren't new. But then it's just about the release time. Like, why do we have nothing to do? But also, like, we kind of... Maybe it's not a coincidence we have this conversation every time like a new season comes out, right? Because there is always this week. Even in the expansion, the beginning of an expansion feels like this too.
Yeah.
Maybe it's more like patches, it's like more obvious, but I don't know. It's kind of a common... something about it isn't quite right, at least for our player base, but maybe it's a Blizzard has to create a game for so many different kinds of people, and because of that, they can't make like the perfect game for anyone. It has to be like great for a large sum of different groups that all want different things, and maybe this is just one of the sacrifices they have to make for that.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's one of those things where it's like, it's not a big deal. It just kind of feels like a big deal this week because it's the only deal that's active this week. Like, it's the only thing we have to think about right now. But like at the end of the day, you know, when you think back to a patch, when you think back to like, you know, Nyalotha patch, do you remember the week where we had corruption? We had like one piece of corruption from Horrific Visions and we're farming Eternal Palace with it. Like, no, that's not right. The thing that matters to us is the first week without the raid, right? Like, if it matters to us in the moment, but then when we think back on a patch, right, the things we care about just haven't started yet.
What do most of us do when a new game comes out that we want to play? Right? We play the shit out of it.
Yeah.
Right?
I just want to go hard.
Yeah, and I think it's that. If you just resonated with what I just said, like you've ever waited for a game to come out and you just want to play the shit out of it, no matter what game it is. If WoW is one of those games for you, patch weeks just don't hit. It's like it's the only game where like the game comes out and then you have to wait a week to play it.
It's so
it's just a strange feeling.
Yeah, it is. It is strange. It's definitely. It is like it's like strange, and it feels like it shouldn't be that way. But like you said, like maybe it's a combination of good technical reasons or reasons for players that are other than us. It's like that, and it's like it's not the end of the world. It just feels wrong, right? Like weird. There have been seasons in the past where they fixed this by just giving us island expeditions or whatever to grind during this week, and I'm glad we're not there at least.
Oh yeah, actually that is a good point. Like how this used to get solved was borrowed power existing in general.
Yeah.
Like this week, I mean, if you were a need to play the game now you could argue whether this was good gameplay or not, but there is something to be said about the dopamine of your character getting stronger and everything that came along with that, with stuff, even the most basic version of it, like artifact power or Azerite power. You had an infinite amount of stuff to do that week. You could be in islands permanently. You know, you could be in Maw of Souls permanently. You could be doing something to make your character stronger, and there just isn't any way to do that now. That's the decision they made at the beginning of a couple expansions ago to kind of remove that FOMO of like I need to be online every day or else I'm behind. That was like a big thing. And
it was like Zereth Mortis was the first patch where this was true, because like even the previous patches with Korthia and the Maw, you grinded them for sockets because that was like. It was a small thing, but it was like big enough that it was worth doing. Yeah,
exactly. And then not many people played that patch relative to who would play an expansion. So then I actually think about it more. That's actually why the beginning of Dragonflight felt the way it did. Because basically Dragonflight was the first expansion where they got rid of all FOMO at the beginning. So you had everyone like crack fiends farming these rares that didn't give you gear that matter. And then basically the same thing existed at the beginning of this expansion, but we had just gone through 3 full patches where you're used to not having FOMO. So people are like hardwired to not be like, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? You kind of know you don't really need to do anything. Except for like the basic renown stuff, which is pretty capped and really easy to do. So I think I used to think like, man, Blizzard was so smart for the beginning of Dragonflight, but I might have think it was just an accident because players were just so conditioned to grinding that they ended up grinding nothing. And they probably learned their lesson from that. And then they didn't do it again.
I think they do need to have that though, because I swear I was talking about this actually earlier with my chat, and that's the exact feeling people are getting.
Your chat is just full of people that want to they want to have something, freaks. Right? They're like addicts.
They need something to grind. Yeah,
they need the.
They're just like literally asking like, "Oh, I'm renowned 770. What do I do?" I'm like, well, just go fucking do something else, or they're like, oh, what should I do?
What you got to tell them is like, if you're not renowned 400 right now, you're
behind. You're so behind if you're not at this point. Yeah.
Oh yeah, dude, that happened a lot in season 3 of Dragonflight. People were like, oh, do I need to do this whole seed gathering shit?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah. No. I mean, if you don't get your augment rune by next week, I don't think anyone's gonna invite you to a group. Like, you gotta get this.
Like, think about how much like we like exploited seeds in that patch and got punished for it to where it was impossible for us to get the max renown gain during the race, and it just didn't even fucking matter, right?
Didn't you guys lose that race? Didn't you guys lose that race?
Well, yeah, but not because of like 0.1 eye level or whatever it was, right? Also, some other stuff happened.
I don't
But
know.
yeah.
I think it could be because of that.
You think it could have been
true.
because of the 0.1i level?
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah,
You should have
I don't
grinded.
know. I think so. I'm just saying. Echo got the rep. They had the augment runes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and
Yeah.
then you could do that same thing this race. Maybe the bands. Although I don't think they lost any. I think they did get both of the guilds got all their eye level and their runs done. You could just argue they lost some sleep and maybe some fun. Definitely lost some fun. That must have been hell.
Yeah. Sorry, I cut you off in the middle of here.
I don't even remember what I was saying.
Yeah, I was being
Talk about the seeds.
Yeah.
Well, we went and farmed, and everyone was like farming seeds, but like it just had almost no effect or zero effect on the race, and it wouldn't affect your guild at all. Like if whether you got it a week later, like the overall power game was nothing.
Yeah.
But you got to do it. Same thing with this patch, right?
Yeah, I mean, this patch, there's like really pretty much nothing with the rep. It's like, it's actually so little. So the things that this rep gives, if anybody in the chat is listening and has FOMO, there's like some champion track pieces of gear, I guess, but they're like so deep in their renown track. And then there's that enchanted runed crest, which historically has been the thing that's maybe good from reps if you can get them to full in time. But I don't think you can with this one. I don't think there's a repeatable way to grind it. Max, of course, will stay silent if there is that everybody's doing.
Well, I wonder if, I mean, to be honest with you, even if our guild knew, I wouldn't even know. Like, I'm like doing my own shit. Yeah,
it's like not even necessarily good either. Because so the reason the enchanted rune crest was good before was that it was just really nice value to have one of those for free because it was kind of costly to make an enchanted aspect crest or gilded crest, and that's changed. The aspect crests are a lot cheaper now. Enchanted aspect crests are a lot cheaper now, so it's like pretty hard for that to even be bad to make ever, which last season that wasn't true, right? Last season getting a free enchanted rune crest was really big value. But this season
I hope it wasn't on purpose. I hope the reason that they didn't create great rewards or a grindable thing is because they just wanted to like totally avoid the like, I mean, 2 tiers in a row rep has been exploited and there's been punishments for it. So they were like, well, if we make it not that worth it and not that grindable, then maybe people will stop doing this. But I would be willing to bet that they could have a really grindable thing and a really great reward. I think any guild that would exploit rep this raid would be truly a fool. Like at least last raid, it made sense in a way why Method and Echo did it and why we did it, because we had gotten punished for that exact thing before, so we kind of knew like, hey, we probably shouldn't do this again. Like they'll probably punish us worse. That would be bad, right? But they didn't get punished, so they are like, well, we could do it. But now everyone's been punished for exploiting rep, and in increasingly severe ways. So like, would anyone want to risk getting banned during the race, which I'm almost positive is exactly what they would do next if someone did it again? I don't think anyone would ever would. So I hope the rest of the game isn't suffering from shitty rewards because they want to like. I kind of, this is kind of like a tinfoil thing anyway. I highly doubt that would be.
Yeah, I feel like there's no way. It would be crazy.
You could be betting on Blizzard being inconsistent with their ban policy. That's often a good bet. Just take the risk.
Yeah, but maybe THD was right after all. Maybe we need some grind back. Just something.
I mean, there is something to say about that. Like when raid buffs have been in the game and then they were removed and then they were brought back. Like there's like things kind of have worked in cycles in this game, and maybe borrowed power is one of them. Like Legion through like hardcore in Legion, like hardcore Legion and BFA all the way through Shadowlands, it was just defined by borrowed power. I refer to them as like the borrowed power expansions. And then Dragonflight was like the Evergreen expansion. Now this is, I guess, another Evergreen expansion. There doesn't seem to be anything like that. And we've had these conversations before to have them at like later in the expansion, not have an expansion defined by it, but at least have patches. Like, man, that would make these patch weeks a little better, Like you just have like a little sauce to look forward to in your character. You can be a little creative. And I at least I'm on the stance that like some borrowed power in this game. I guess it's easy for me to say because I'm not the one with 15 characters that would have to grind it. But it would, for someone who would have like one character or a couple, I think it would be.
But that's most players.
Sweet. That is most players. Yeah. Sorry.
Did your speaker just proc and that procced your puppies?
It was the doorbell. I gotta get it. 1 second.
Okay.
We were talking about grind
a little bit of borrowed power.
and-
Okay, like a little bit of a little something at the start of a new patch. I mean, it's possible to detach the borrowed power from the grind as well, right? Like, I don't know. You could have.
I
a
don't
new
think it
patch
hurts
where
to like have something to work on at the beginning of the patch.
Yeah, but if it's like uncapped, so that's the problem, right? Is like how many hours of grind do you want to do during this week per character? Because if you pick a reasonable sounding number like 10, 10 is a lot of hours to play in the new week for a lot of people. If it's like boring,
well, it could also be
stuff.
10 hours.
But it's also over
next
week
few
1 or day
weeks.
1 for like THD and people like
The
that.
issue with AP is it's infinite, right?
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't ever stop.
But
You
like
could-
any reasonable finite number will be done in day 2 by the people that are not reasonable players of this game, right?
But
that's
Sure.
fine.
But think about like, I don't know, good borrow power, essences, corruption.
Mhm.
You could make anything. Like, the reason those things were good is because of how it affected your character, not how grindy or weird it
Right.
was to get it, right? In fact, it actually got a lot better once they made it more attainable. But you could just it just needs to be designed well in the way that it's like impacting your character. Like, something that's just like you do 3% more damage is really boring. But something where like your abilities change or tornadoes shoot out of you and do damage, like that shit's cool, right? So I'm just saying they should come out with some cool different shit that people could look forward to. I think it'd be good for the game.
Yeah, agreed. I'm like, if you just like complete something and then it'll unlock some laser beams shooting out of your eye for the next patch, right? Like, that's kind of nice to have. It doesn't have to be something that you have to be working on the entire patch. As
Yeah,
long
it's
as
weird
like,
because they kind of added
something
that
within
with
the
the
first week.
ring in the 0.0.7, right? It's like decently close to that, right? Like,
dude, the ring is so boring though. Holy
yeah, but
moly.
it does shoot lasers out of you at targets when you hit them.
Does it actually?
Yeah, if you got your graphics on, like you
I
see the
never
proc.
noticed. Thought it was just
Maybe
like a
they
stat
could be
proc or
cooler
something.
looking. They're not as cool as the essence animations for sure, but they're like kind of noticeable.
Yeah, for me, it would have to be cool if it's like gameplay changing.
Right.
That's by
Me
far
too.
the major factor.
Yeah, I also would be down to see some experimentation in that space again. But I wouldn't want it to involve grinding during this week. Like, I'm glad to not be pressured during this week because there's already a lot of pressure whenever the actual season does start, right? Like, then you are on the clock, like you said, right, Max? And that's like, I don't know. I'm glad we have one less week of being, sort of on the clock, especially because it's not doing the fun stuff, right? It's doing the boring stuff. Like, my favorite memories of the weeks like this in BFA and Legion, or BFA Legion was like hanging out with my guild, watching TV shows while we were doing islands or whatever.
We watched
right?
the entire Harry Potter series while doing
exactly. Like
Sweet.
that sort of thing is the best part of an island grind, and I'd rather not have that than have it again.
Well, isn't that a problem too? Where next week is all at once. That's kind of going back to what I was saying before. Like, can't we just space it out more so it's not all at once?
The problem is like,
all
if
right.
there's a good thing to grind, then if you want to be like on pace or whatever, you're using all of your free time on it anyways, right? So, like,
but
if
like,
they
say
split
for
it in half,
example,
you're
right?
still...
Like, say this week M plus comes out, or next week M plus comes out, and raid doesn't. Then you're not having to like cram in M plus before raid night or whenever you're scheduled to raid. And maybe like only normal comes out this week, so that you can work on that. You're not having to like, all right, do your heroic, and then you got to do your normal, and then you got to jump into mythic. It just feels like there's too much at once, and I feel like if they spaced it out, it could also be another solution.
Yeah, for me, it's like spacing it out kind of just doubles the like rush, because
then it's like the Mythic Plus week, I guess.
Mhm.
You're turning old heroic week into Mythic Plus week, and then it's like you have to end that week with like you got everything you needed for Mythic Plus, right?
Yeah.
It's like this finite thing you have to have instead of like this thing you're constantly chipping away at, which I think is their idea for Mythic Plus for most people. Is like there's probably always a little upgrade you can get, but it's not huge, and you can go in there and get it.
I think that it does depend on the kind of player you are, though, right? Like, depends on if you're somebody who has like a very limited amount of hours per week to play the game. It would probably be a lot more friendly to have the game spaced out more like that. Although if you're somebody like that who takes a week off work or a day off work or something like that to play a new expansion or patch, then it kind of switches back, and again you'd rather have it all be concentrated.
I'm thinking about it a different way. I think the player that doesn't have a lot of time, that like doesn't log in that much during Mythic Plus week, is just not getting invited to pug raids next Tuesday because everyone else is
True.
like 15 eye levels higher than them, and they're not. We're like Tuesday when the patch comes out. That's not true.
Yeah, I
But-
guess it's
or
you're
when
kind
the
of
raids
toast
come out.
either way.
Yeah.
That is true.
Yeah,
I will say this is a blessing for me because tomorrow night Monster Hunter Wilds does come out, and I want to play that before the
Oh,
season
cool.
starts.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I'm also like, I mean, for me personally, it's tough. Like I like having a week of nothing, but then I also liked having the heroic week, right? So like I liked the start of it. For me personally, given the way that I like create content and do race world first and stuff, casting, the more spaced out it is, the better, because like with this setup, for instance, compared to last season, I'm just gonna have like a much busier week one. So I'm just gonna, get less sleep or whatever, which is okay, but I preferred the other way. But like, I think if I was somebody who was just playing the game without doing all the content creating, but I was playing the game as much as I did, I would probably prefer this to last season. Like, I'd probably prefer the no heroic week.
Even in like top guilds, like the heroic week versus no heroic week is pretty. Like, there's a lot of people on both sides. Like, basically, anyone has to take time off of anything.
Yeah.
Heroic week sucks because it's like doubles the amount of time you have to take off. Because heroic week is like you're there permanently doing stuff. The other thing is, like, I was talking about this in my chat the other day. I was having them guess like the raid comp for the new raid, and I was like, I'll give you another chance to do it. And then, but I'm like, nothing's really going to change. And they're like, what do you mean? There's going to be a bunch of tuning next week. I'm like, no, you're thinking of like what normally happened in like Narrowbar Palace, for example, where like, oh, they get 4 days of heroic data, and then they make a change on Friday, and then maybe a change on Monday. But they're going to have absolutely no more information this Friday and Monday than they did last week when they did their final tuning pass. Again, the patch is basically going to go live the way it is right now, or the season. And then also the problem is as well, let's just say they just fix it next week. Well, then they're really hesitant to do any kind of nerfs during the race. So like now you're waiting like 2 weeks to get potentially proper balance for Mythic Plus and for everyone else because that heroic week isn't there. So I think it does affect. And also you could just argue the fight tuning could be bad, like there's just something not great. Like I think Mythic especially, maybe this is a less problem because like how many people are in Mythic in week one? Not many. It's pretty small. But for those people, the tuning of those bosses, they have infinitely less information of how powerful you are without heroic week, I think. It's kind of like all happening at once.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, how do you think people are going to take in the raid next week? I made a tweet earlier today saying that I think that this is going to be one of the most, or I think I said the most popular raid for a more casual player since Castle Nathria, widely loved by the casual audience. And the theory is that boss quality, raid difficulty, all of that stuff is significantly less important than just a really well executed theme or aesthetic. And like if you look at all of the best raids ever, while they did have great bosses, they had some of the best aesthetics and themes ever. Like Nighthold, Blackrock Foundry, Castle Nathria, Throne of Thunder. They like all are hitting on every level. And this raid you at least know has the theme. I think we've talked about this before on the podcast, but another thing I wanted to ask you is, I think the other thing besides theme and aesthetic that really matters is like a certain boss that doesn't just fuck you on heroic. Like on Mythic, they're trying to fuck you. That's the whole point. But like on heroic, sometimes there's a Smolderon where, the expectation is every single person in your group has to soak these 5 orbs or basically you die, right? It's so punishing. Do you think there's going to be any boss like that next week? And if so, which one?
Maybe Mugsy or Gallywix.
Gallywix is let's just completely ignore Gallywix. It's an end boss.
End boss, yeah, basically.
And we know anyone who's claiming to like have an idea of how hard or whatever that's going to be is totally making it up, right? So let's just say just from the heroic bosses we've seen, like maybe Styx, right? Like Styx, the people who all get randomly picked, they kind of have to like roll over certain things or you kind of die. That could be one that's like not super late in the raid. Mugsy isn't too bad. Maybe it's like people randomly swapping sides of the room, but I think an early strat for that on heroic will be like you literally tank the boss like against the wall in the side of the room it's in, so no one can like accidentally change sides. Then you just make a call to swap Because like in Mythic, you know how it changes for when 20 people are over on one side, but like literally 19 won't work. It has to be all 20.
Yeah.
On Heroic, I think it's majority.
It's just half. Yeah.
Yeah, so like that, if you're tanking the boss near the middle of the room, that's gonna be a disaster. So like, as long as you're tanking it on the wall, I think it'll be fine. I'm just wondering if there's a boss in this raid that will make people be like, I don't like this.
Maybe Sprocket Monger Lock and Stock with the like somebody if you blow up 2 bombs within short time, it blows up the raid.
Yeah, but on Sprockenmonger, can't you have on Heroic? There's a Vuln, isn't there? Is there a
There's
Vuln
a
or no
Vuln.
Vuln?
Yeah, there's a Vuln when you
On the
blow up a
raid.
bomb.
There's a Vuln on the raid. Is there a Vuln on the player who blows up bombs?
Yes.
How long?
Yeah. 2 minutes.
Yeah, so that's hard. So then you can't just have like one person solo all the mines. That makes it a joke. It's like you're having, I think in each phase it's 12 bomb soakers.
Yeah, it's 12. I think it's 12 on Heroic and 16 on Mythic.
Yeah, that's
yeah. So the Heroic version like is with 12, especially. I'm not sure how that'll even work in 10-player raids. I'm sure
it'll just spawn 2 mines on each instead of 4, and then maybe on Mythic it'll spawn on Heroic, 30-man Heroic, it could spawn 6 mines. If
it's
it
tough though
doesn't,
because 2 of the quadrants, it's always 2 quadrants are electrified, and then the other 2 spawn the mines. But yeah, maybe it'll scale weird where the difficulty's like kind of easier at 30 because you just have only 12 of your 30.
Yeah, exactly. I was about to say it would be way easier on 30
Yeah.
players. There'd be less people on Vuln every time you have to make that decision.
But either way, that strikes me as a boss where not only that, but also the somebody accidentally not seeing one in melee and then stepping on it and blowing up the raid thing. I could see that being a bit of a Heroic brick wall. It's
I think,
like
so I don't know
it could be fifth
anything.
raid. Yeah.
I don't know anything about these raid fights, but if they were to design quirky mechanics, just like I'm trying to like think of an example, like Xanish, during
Soccer boss?
the soccer boss, yeah.
Yeah, but on
If they have a
Heroic, that
boss
was easy.
Yeah, like I think if they ever come up with mechanics like that, they just have to be dumb fun. Like it just has to be easy. It has to be something where the raid can like fuck up, but it has to
It
be
can be hard in
something that's,
Mythic.
like,
It just on Heroic, it can't be hard really. Even near
yeah,
the
but
end.
even then, like it depends on how late into Mythic too, because Xanish was kind of an early boss, and that boss was super annoying to do, even though the idea of the fight is cool. It's like it's supposed to be fun, right? Like it's like a soccer boss, but it just turned out to be frustrating instead.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that the Mythic side of things, I don't know. The fact that there's you go in, you do the first boss, and then you can go to any of the 4 after that. I suspect that there will be ones that are easy enough that it's like not too bad. But yeah, I mean, Xanish was like boss. It was one of the bosses you could go to 4th in a raid of like 12 bosses, right? And so like this one's only got 8. You have to. It gets hard. I think it'll get hard fast.
That. I don't know. It's like they're doing 2 raids in a row. Which tell me if I'm wrong. Have they done that before? Has that ever happened?
I don't think so.
Was Sarkareth boss 8?
Sarkareth, I think, was 9. No, it was 8.
Dragonflame was pretty low bosses too, right?
Yeah,
maybe Sarkareth was.
No, Sarkareth was 9.
Sarkareth was 9. Okay, so I believe this is true. They've never done 2 8 boss raids anymore. And in an interview after season 1, they mentioned that they like the number 8 for bosses. And now they're doing that for a second straight patch. I just want to see how that works. That doesn't necessarily mean there's a bad difficulty curve. Like for example, Vault of the Incarnates, I think, was an 8 boss raid, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think there was necessarily a bad difficulty curve in that dungeon. Like it was, like I think it increased in difficulty, but that happens. But it doesn't. No boss to boss was like, why are we here? Right? They all kind of made sense. In Amir Drasil, Tindril was the boss that didn't make sense when you got there, and in last raid, obviously Brood Twister was the boss that didn't make sense. Well, I guess technically you could have gone to Nexus Princess at the same time, which would have also been not a good thing. But my theory is I think with how hard first bosses are and how hard end bosses are, this is mostly a Mythic thing, but probably also true in Heroic. There's just how hard a general end boss is. They're relatively within the same level of difficulty in end boss, and then first bosses you know exactly what to expect. So just bridging that together with just 6 bosses in between is such a massive difficulty jump that like it's hard for there not to be a boss where it's like, wow, this is way harder than the last boss we did. So I don't know if 8 bosses is a number, but I also hope that they can figure out a way to do it this raid.
Yeah,
My
so one argument I did hear against having more bosses is it'll make raid progression longer for guilds that are late CE, especially if they're low raid hours. Like if you only have 2 hours a day to, or not 2 hours, if you only have 2 nights to raid per week, you can't really get through that many bosses.
Yeah,
That makes sense. To a
I
certain
think it depends
extent.
on the difficulty. Like, to some extent, it might make it easier. So, for instance, if my suspicion is the thing that's missing is like a nice, easy boss 2 and 3 between like Vexy and the next 4.
Yeah.
That's my. If I had to guess right now, it's a pretty unfounded guess. Obviously, tuning could be pretty different, but my guess is that that would be the spot in the raid where I would use the scalpel and open it up and put in 2 more bosses. Would be between Vexy and
Well,
and
or
then the next one.
yeah. Like,
Yeah.
so first of all, I'm never advocating for like 12 plus boss raids. I think every raid that's had that many bosses could have lost a few and been a better raid. I think that, generally speaking, when you add bosses, you are not adding Brood Twisters or Nexus Princesses or obviously Silken Courts or anything like that. You're adding at worst you're adding in a Rashonan, which I
Right.
mean maybe that extends your guild's progression by like a night or 2 or something over the whole arm, but I think it would ease the curve a lot.
And it actually would make progression easier in a lot of cases as well. If you imagine a raid, like, okay, imagine Battle of Dazar'alor, and we took out Gronk and Jadefire Masters, and you're just working on Opulence, getting 2 less bosses worth of gear every week until you kill it. Like, that's going to make progression
And it's
take
not
longer.
fun. Like you could make the argument that like maybe people are just looking to reduce their total amount of raid days in a season, or a way you could look at it is they're trying to reduce their total amount of raid days in a season that fucking suck. Right? Like doing a raid, if you're signing up for a raid, I know there's like, especially in the Mythic Plus community, there's these jaded raiders that just hate raiding and they're there just for their gear and they fucking hate they have to do it and they fuck raid, fuck, right? I get that. But there's also people that just genuinely enjoy raiding, but also wouldn't enjoy being on a boss like Brood Twister 2 or 3 weeks early because that raid night is fucking miserable. You have no chance of killing this boss, right? But you're there. That's totally fucking different than a raid day where you're fighting a boss that's fair and you're all improving at it at a reasonable pace and eventually killing it, right? So it's a question of 2 things. Is our experience in the patch being extended, or because there probably is a finite amount of time people want to spend on raid, like even if they're all good raid days, do you want to like raid for 5 months instead of like 3? Like maybe for a lot of people, maybe no, right? But I definitely think there's a huge difference, and that's the entire argument, right? I think you had an issue with the argument before of like, how is it making it better with Brood Twister being the way it is if you're just the way you're solving it is making an earlier boss harder,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But like that is the thing. It's like there's the exact same guild can fight Mythic Ansorek on week 1 and Mythic Ansorek on week 16, and they would have fun on week 16, and on week 1 they would have literally 0 fun. They would be like, what the fuck is happening? Like this is not okay.
This
right?
is stupid. Yeah.
So simply by changing the time you get to a boss naturally, by spending your time in the meantime on a boss that is fair for you, hopefully, you can have the same boss later in you're having fun versus not having fun.
I mean, I think even M+ers that raid for gear would welcome the addition of some more easy early bosses that they can be farming quickly and like, maybe.
Yeah, no, for
maybe it
M+
means
is
that-
definitely a positive.
Yeah,
That's
you-
another
But
thing
I was
with-
thinking more
that's
along
another-
the lines of
like the low time 6
Well-
hour per week guilds or whatever.
Well, yeah,
yeah.
but that's
even
another
they would
thing
like
with 10 bosses.
If they can be farming a couple more easier bosses once they get to progging, the Kaivezas or the Silken Courts of the world, their gear will get better faster, right? Like, yeah, it's going to take you an extra 20 minutes to reclear each week or more if you wipe or something on them, but depending on where you insert bosses on the difficulty curve, it could actually make life easier for the more casual guilds because there's that will increase the income of gear if you add it before that like wall in the raid.
And
Again,
what
it's
did
like
we
it
learn?
I
depends
think the
on where
problem is
the
more-
raid is missing, right? Because like
Okay.
if the raid already has like 2 or 3, easy first and second boss level bosses, I don't think adding more is very good. But again, my suspicion with this raid is that it's missing an easy boss 2 and 3. And if that's the case, then I do think adding those, like, it does good things for everybody.
Yeah, I don't think it's like getting there is the problem. It's re-clear is what I was
Right.
getting more at. Because like yeah, like it's definitely nice for these
yeah.
guilds to get to Overnex later, but that's not the problem. The problem is they're having to re-clear, right? Like these guys only have say 3 hours that night, and if they only have 3 hours, they can't be spending that on re-clearing some of the easy bosses. Like they have to be getting to Overnex and doing it.
That's
And
true.
these guilds are also usually extender guilds, so if they're having to extend on Overnex, they're not getting all that extra loot from the first, I don't know, say like 5 bosses we would have to kill
Yeah,
before that.
but when you're talking about re-clear though, like the thing that really slows down your re-clear is the Brood Twister and Ovanax and plus bosses where you're like, okay, we might wipe on these.
It's any boss you might wipe to. Yeah.
It's any
exactly.
like killing bosses, like more like third and fourth bosses that like that tier of boss, the ration end tier of boss, where like you're just gonna kill it real quick and get gear. Those are like really efficient. And also to mention about re-clearing or extending, sorry. I think with crests being a thing, like those guilds probably know by now that it kind of only logically makes sense. You're going to extend like every season at some point, just because of the way crests work. Like there's just the time it takes and the limited amount of time you have to raid each week to kill those early bosses because crest exists is just something that doesn't really make sense to do. And it's earlier in the season. It was like not as early as it was in season 2 of Dragonflight because that was just like we literally can't get any more strong.
Yeah.
But yeah, and another thing too we learned last patch, going back a little bit about adding more bosses too, is I think we learned last patch that having 4 bosses that could realistically be pugged for a 2-box in your vault kind of slaps. Like that's just a good thing.
Yeah.
Like a lot of
Yeah,
people
that
like
shit
that.
owns.
But you can't have that in an 8-boss raid.
Yeah.
In my opinion. Like you
I agree.
cannot have. Now, keep in mind the last 4 bosses of Nerebar Palace were probably the last 4 bosses in a row hardest of all time, right? Like they the pulls at
It's up
least,
there with
like,
Sepulcher. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, right? Which is not a raid you want to be compared to for like regular difficulty, right? So,
Yeah.
you're talking about having the most thing like realistically, even though there's 8 bosses, it is highly slash I bet everything I own that the last 4 bosses of this raid will not be harder than the last raid because the last raid happened, right? So maybe it's possible that it's not that big of a deal, but I would like the idea of like there being a good difficulty curve with 8 bosses and still being able to kill the first 4 in a pug, because I think that is really good, like for everyone.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I don't ever see them doing this again. I feel like them having the first 4 bosses being pugable was an anomaly, but I do hope to see this again. Like it's such a blessing for
Yeah.
a lot of the players who are like there for gear if they can just kill the first 4 bosses and get mythic loot.
Yeah. I think I actually I agree. Like I think that was a nice upside to something that that has more downsides than upsides, which was the overall difficulty slope of Nerebar, and the way to fix it is to go up to 10 bosses and
I
then
think
have
so.
the first 4 be puggable.
Like basically Blizzard
Yeah.
thinks that 8 bosses is the number, and I just strongly think it's 9 or 10. They're just missing just one. Like ideally we keep the first 4 the way they are, and you don't feel like an absolute idiot pulling boss number 5. But also Brood Twister was way harder than it should have been, to be honest with you, even as boss 5. And it was hard in the worst possible way.
Yeah, it was not fun hard.
It was not fun hard, yeah. So this could be just a Brood Twister problem, right? Because like Nexus Princess was also like really fucking hard, but Nexus Princess was sweet, if you didn't have to one tank it.
Yeah. Although it was the kind of hard where it was like it didn't feel particularly great to be pulling it while you were under geared. Like if you were a guild where you're like, okay, we're gonna have enough gear to realistically kill this thing in 3 weeks or whatever, you didn't really have that much fun pulling it while you weren't there yet. So you kind of couldn't go there instead of Overnax until pretty late in the season.
They also
where
had to nerf
started making that call.
a ton of stuff more last season. Like they just simply overtuned more fights last season. Like the Race World First Guilds having Nexus Princess like ready to die, but then we just have to one tank it, so plus 80 pulls, 80 miserable pulls, right? To kill it. Like that is, even to their own admission, like, okay, that boss had too much HP, right? Just very obviously. Same thing with Brood Twister being a little bit too hard. And then Silken Court was probably totally fair. In fact, you could argue maybe even they nerfed it too much. And then the Queen was insane. Yeah, this tier, I don't know. I feel like Blizzard has a history of making reactive choices with their tuning. After easy tiers, they're hard. After hard tiers, they're easy. Kind of a Mirdrasil into Nerebar Palace is one of the few times that hasn't happened ever. It's like a Mirdrasil wasn't surprising that it was hard because Abberus existed. Even though Abberus wasn't hard because of the raid, wasn't easy because of the raid. It was easy because of the upgrade system. And then Vault before that, Tuma Sargeras into Argus, right? 10 bosses die in day 1 on Argus after Tuma Sargeras existed. These things happen pretty normally. I think this raid should probably be a step back.
Well, we could argue that Abberus was just easier mechanically, right? I mean, I feel like it's very different. The raids we saw.
So hard to tell. Because
there's certainly a lot less one-shotty.
How do you tell the pure mechanical difficulty? Yeah, but one-shotty is about how much damage something is doing and how much health you have. Like I do this for a living, and I could not tell you how hard something is genuinely on PTR when we're super super undergeared and it seems really really fucking hard. Because dude, when you have 6 eye levels, that was the average. By the way, our week 1, this is just Race World first, but this reflects to everyone else too. You guys had the same crest cap as us. We had 6 eye levels more in week 1 than we did relatively in any other raid ever in week 1 of Mythic since I've been doing the race in Abberus. 6 eye levels is you could have 6 less eye levels and something is a one shot versus it not killing you. It could be you have to use a raid cooldown for this thing, and now it doesn't really do that much to you. This ad has to be killed, and you have to assign CDs for it, and it just dies to natty cleave. 6 eye levels is an incredible amount of power. It's so much power. That it's hard for me to distinguish the mechanical difficulty because it's all fluid. If something's mechanically difficult, it's usually made harder by the fact that the boss is beating your brains in at the same time, right? But that wasn't happening because we had so much HP. So everything seemed easy. For me at least, it would be impossible to say that was a mechanically easy raid on paper because the only time you can truly judge that is by doing it, and you were doing it with cheats on basically. And who knows?
Well, no. So what I meant is, for example, Silken Cord, it didn't matter how much gear you have. You're just going to get one shot if you touch another player. Or if
Silken Cord is an extremely unique boss fight in that way. Though, I don't even know.
Well, but it wasn't just
fight
that boss. Overnax, if you
too.
failed the egg, right? Yeah, Tindril, if you failed to soak the seeds, right? You blow up no matter what. If you get hit by web blades, you die. It doesn't matter how much gear you have.
Echo of Neltharion, if you don't break the right wall, you all die. If you don't kill the ads when you go downstairs,
well, but I mean,
you die.
That's why, when
I'm talking about portal, you die.
Mechanical complexity, though, they're not comparable. The mechanics that were required in Neltharion or Echo of Neltharion, there were only a couple of your entire raid blows up if X person fucks up, right?
That is not. There was a ton.
I think there's a little bit of Echo of Neltharion being super annoying and stupid erasure.
I mean, it was just breaking the walls, right?
That was where we had the debut of the stupid ass map week, or remember the BDG map?
Five people got a debuff 5 times a phase, and if one of them went to the wrong spot, your entire raid died.
Yeah, it was pretty dumb.
If you didn't break the right wall, your entire raid
died. Yeah.
If you didn't dispel at the right time in P2, your entire raid died. If the exact people that went downstairs didn't kill the ad, your entire raid died.
But the thing that made Echo Neltharion, it was still, I think, easier than, because the thing about Echo Neltharion was that the numbers check was free once you even that first week, but then starting the second week, right? Yeah. So but that adds an extra layer. If you were a guild that was smart, you could tell everybody to just focus on mechanics, right? And it's your damage doesn't matter. I literally just need you to stand in the right place for this. We're stopping damage anyways, right? And that's not something that was able to be said about any of Nerebar Palace's bosses. Right?
Exactly. That's the 6 eye level thing. When something is mechanically difficult, it is made exponentially more difficult when you are dealing with the amount of damage you're taking or the amount of damage you need to do. But when you remove that, like you did in Nerebar Palace, because you had 6 eye levels, every bit of mechanical difficulty, at least in my opinion, is, again, I don't really know because I know that it's impossible to gauge those things when all of those other things don't matter and all you have to focus on is the mechanical difficulty.
Right. I think you're both right. I think that you could take the Echo of Neltharion mechanics and put it on a boss where you had to be using your brain to optimize damage, and it would be very stupid hard, right? Those mechanics could really have sucked. It got bailed out from that being a possibility because the boss's number check was so free. And it was still hard for a lot of guilds, right? It was still hard for everybody to get through that part. But at least once you figured out the dance, you didn't also then have to optimize, 20% more damage or whatever, right? It was just
also Skarn was nasty on that too, as well.
Yeah,
the 2 bosses previous Magmarax as well. Magmarax is more like Magmarax was purely
That was
made an easy
sleeper
boss.
OP, or sleeper hard. Yeah.
Well, sleeper hard, but like, bro, can you imagine how hard Magmarax would have been with 6S eye level?
Yeah.
Like that boss would have fucking beat your fucking brains in, and it only felt that easy because everything else didn't matter because you had gear.
Yeah, so I guess it's like there is a trend. I think to Dorky's point that is good is like there is a trend towards bosses having mechanics that you literally just have to pass fail, right? Like there are a lot of mechanics on bosses that if you just do them wrong, you're raid wipes, right? Like it's
That's
not
been
a
true
case
for 10
Right.
years though.
Well, but I think it's been
Well, it just feels
increasingly
like there's a
true
lot more of
recently.
them this time around, and not only is it more, but it's like more frequent because like these are happening every
More since
10
when?
seconds instead of.
Like since what raid?
I want to say Amir Jaso was like where it really stepped up. At least from my experience, like I don't know, maybe I
I
could
think it
be
might
wrong
have been
about this too, but
Sepulcher.
Yeah, I was going to say Sepulcher.
well,
was a
Sepulcher, okay,
massive
Sepulcher
jump.
was like a big one. Yeah,
'Cause
that was
I think even
definitely
Vault
the
and
outlier.
Well, Vault was a retraction from Sepulcher.
Yeah.
Easily.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
a
Vault had a
comeback
lot of
to
stuff
Earth.
that killed you. I guess it was just Razageth had a lot of stuff that just killed you from 100 to 0, but not your whole raid. But I guess the kind of synthesis of these 2 points is that the amount of those mechanics, whether or not that makes a boss like nuclear difficulty or not, is dependent on not just how many stupid ass one shot, insane coordination pass fail mechanics there are, but also whether that's paired with a brutally tight numbers check that taxes all of your brain power and forces you to, be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. Yeah.
That is kind of true. I mean, I do feel like there are significantly less checks nowadays. I remember having this
What does that mean? What kind of
conversation
checks?
with my
Pure
chat.
DPS check
Well, like
bosses?
DPS or number or like healing checks.
Oh
There
boy,
really
you
aren't
want to know
that
why?
many.
You want to know why, right? Or wait, do you know why?
No.
Okay, do you remember when?
Well, I
everyone
don't know why.
complained-
What you're gonna say? Why?
Or did you play in Sanctum of Domination?
Yeah.
Do you remember what everyone hated about that raid?
Okay, you're
No.
thinking about the like phase DPS check,
But those are checks.
mechanic.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly. But
which
those are like
gone now.
So
Yeah.
the reason why there's no more checks is the only check that exists on any boss is when it dies, usually, or like killing an ad in time or something like that. But the reason that is the case is like everyone complained about damage checks, so they
like
started
the
making
stop damage thing.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
started-
exactly. Like
I
they
see what you
can't
mean, yeah.
do a phase 1 70% damage check
Yeah,
without it becoming bullshit once you've gotten phase 1 on farm, because then you're
Yeah.
stopping damage
So,
as
like,
you get
the-
better and better at it.
You see Sarkareth where like, the phase 1 is timed and the phase 2 is
Yeah.
timed, and like you can hit like a cap on those, but not until farm.
Not realistically, yeah.
Not realistically. So the way they've always done that now is like there is kind of no checks purely for that reason. And I also agree with you that like it does kind of seem like that is this is actually so familiar to a Mythic Plus argument actually. Remember that like thing we always talk about in Mythic Plus where it's like it feels like you're trying to not die and we would like you to just try to test our damage and see if we can do it in
Yeah.
the key level. It's like the same argument. But the so there is actually 2 in this raid, which is really fun. So like at least to my knowledge, there are in this raid on Mythic, I think on Heroic too, actually. There are phased percentage-based pushes, I think for the first time in I think since Sanctum of Domination. There might be one on like a not super relevant boss since then, but it's been many years since there has been one. And there's a dedicated execute phase on 2 bosses that, and what I mean by that is like, for example, Razageth had an execute phase, but the damage you did in P2 to that made the execute phase easier. What I mean is like, there is an enrage timer that starts when you hit this percentage, and it starts there no matter what you did before that point, which does potentially introduce some damage holding and stopping stuff, potentially, right? But there's going to be an execute check in
Yeah.
in 2 bosses. And again, there hasn't even been one boss in like almost 5 years that has been like that, and there's 2 in a row, and they're at the end of the raid.
Yeah,
that
it's
could be wild.
Muggsy and the slot machine, right?
Yeah, Slot Machine and Muggsy both have like completely dedicated execute phases where the damage you do before that point at the early part of the fight has absolutely nothing to do. Like it just basically on Muggsy, the boss's energy goes to 0. When it hits 100, you die. And the one-arm bandit goes through its like multiple abilities, and it just does this bomb thing at the end, 10-second cast, then you blow up, right? But it starts at that percent. So if you're looking for checks,
yeah.
checks.
I mean, there have been the other way that they've implemented DPS checks has been shields on bosses that you have to break, right? Like Razageth
Which also
shields
exists.
herself. And,
There's one on Galliwix.
Yeah, so it's not like there's been completely absent of this.
But those are
sort of
pretty rare
thing.
too. But yeah, they do
yeah,
exist.
it is definitely true that there's a lot less like bosses where you have multiple DPS checks a very
Yeah, it's just
sparse
like
throughout.
nowadays.
Like, give an example
there's
of a
lot
boss,
less.
Dorki. What
Like
boss
right
do you
now,
miss?
rating doesn't. Well, I mean, obviously, like for the past few tiers of rating, I want to. I don't know how long it's been. It's definitely been a while where rating hasn't felt like, all right, you got to push damage. It has always been, all right, guys, just play safe. Like literally, as long as we play safe, we'll
Oh, you're just not playing at a
clear
high
the
enough
raid,
guild
right?
rank. I'm pretty sure.
Probably, but I mean, I've
That's
been
most
literally
rating
the
people,
difference
since.
for
right? Like
that.
most
Yeah, I know. I
most
mean, but like
people are
maybe
in
that
guilds
just
where
means
that's
that
gonna be
like,
true.
because like I'm still at a pretty high guild rank, right? Like we get
Yeah.
Hall
What
of
rank are
Fame
you?
every tier, like 50 something world, something
That's
like
pretty
that.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but I
so
mean, like
if he's
if
not
that's
experiencing
not high
that,
enough to the
very
Yeah,
few
point
yeah.
people
where
If you're
you
are.
rank, if
need
you're rating
to,
top
Yeah.
50 in the world and you feel like you
and
aren't
we're just like
doing
worrying
a real
about
check,
just
that's nice.
like, yeah, like that's not a good
Like,
situation
think
to be
about
in.
it.
I mean, like obviously for
Starauger.
you guys definitely have that,
I mean, even my
push
guild,
damage and
I
make sure you beef a boss.
Bro, we had to one tank Nexus Princess Skyvessa, man. Like, that is
Yeah.
Yeah,
fucking
yeah, of course, yeah.
insane.
like my
But
my guild
for
basically was
for
like,
most
we're
other
not gonna
guilds
do
in the
that.
world,
But that's kind of
it's
bullshit
been
if,
the
like,
case of
the
just
only
like play safe.
people who are experiencing a check are exactly like the Race World First
Yeah.
guilds. Like that. I
Right,
mean, it is kind
exactly.
of hard to do that, though, because you do just simply get more gear every week. Although the skill level, like, just on average will go down a little bit, like the capable throughput through the weeks as you get gear. Like, I remember Rashok, for example. Rashok was like a huge letdown because it's such an awesome boss, but just instantly died. But if you talk to like almost anyone in the community, that is not the fucking experience they have with Rashok. Like, Rashok was almost perfectly made to, be pretty challenging for almost anyone who did it, because you just had to dodge fire to kill it. And like usually when you killed that boss, same thing with Sludge Fist. Like, Sludge Fist is usually the
Yeah, I was gonna
poster
say Sludge
child.
Fist.
The poster child for this argument is like pretty much anyone when they killed Sludge Fist, it was not the first time they got to the end of the fight, and they had to like let it hit the wall and like DPS through it, which is fucking sick. But I think it's so hard for them to actually do that. Actually, it's honestly insane they did that. Like, I can't even imagine they do that now. Like, how do you create a boss where you're like beating the massive bang at the end in the Race to World First, and you're also doing that like 2 months later? It just seems, especially with a stacking raid buff, it seems impossible.
And yet, I mean, there is some natural pressure towards that happening, because that feeling of like, okay, now we're good enough at this boss to deserve to kill it, and then actually being capped at how much throughput you can do on that boss. Like, you can probably get 10% more damage in that window, right? Of like feeling good enough about a kill to then actually doing the max possible that your guild could actually do. So as long as they land it dying somewhere in that range, right? Like, you're not going to complain if you have a pretty good pull and then you kill it during, say you kill the slot machine during its final cast, right? And it's like, yeah, somebody died 30 seconds before the end, right? But like,
It's like Smolderon. That's
you
exactly how
mostly played it
Smolderon
good,
died
right?
for most people. It was
right,
like,
exactly. Like,
yeah.
the first time you get that far into the fight, you're going to wipe to it because things have gone really wrong. And then eventually you're going to kill it. Was it on a perfect pull? Did the pull need to be perfect to kill it? Yes, for Race to World First Kaiveza. No, for like almost any of these other fights that have had an end like that.
And that's
the
probably a
question
good
is just,
thing.
is it going to feel satisfying, right? Because it doesn't feel satisfying if it's Guardian of the first ones and you just walk in and you kill it on your 10th pull of the boss because it's so easy that you need to get very little execution. But as long as you get past that point of we feel like we deserve a kill, and then you kill it during its enrage cast, they have like it can sort of fit anywhere in there. So I actually think it's not as hard as it seems to land a boss in that spot. The main thing that you want to avoid is you need to avoid it being impossible to kill, and you need to also avoid it dying before you feel like you deserve to kill it, right? Before you feel like you've mastered the fight and are
I think it's
now,
also
like, ready to kill it.
It's also just it's really hard nowadays for these fights to have your entire raid alive until the very end.
Yeah.
Like I wonder how many guilds are actually killing, say, Queen Ansorek with everyone alive the entire time. It's got to be pretty rare, right?
Yeah, for most kills I've seen, it's pretty rare.
Yeah,
even
like
now.
17 alive or something, and then down
but it's
to 12.
killable that way. But you could argue that it's good that it's killable that way, because if they required you to actually have everyone alive, that would make the boss significantly harder, right? Maybe too hard. How many
But
pulls
it's
does it
not
take to kill Queen
satisfying.
Ansorek now?
That's the problem.
Like, what are the? Does anyone know like the? Isn't there like a website for this? Progstats.io.
Yeah.
Recent pull count. Is there any way to see that?
Uh,
You can see like the amount of kills per week, and that's been pretty consistent now for a couple months. And then, yeah, it seems like the majority of people kill it right around 200 pulls.
Right, which I imagine that this graph has been shifting leftwards
Oh, big
towards
time.
that over probably over the first like 15 weeks, and then it probably stabilized around there.
Yeah.
Maybe over the first 10 weeks, and then it stabilized around there. Yeah.
Yeah, that is an interesting thing where like Sludge Fit, like Rashok kind of required you to have everyone like somehow they created a boss mid in the raid where everyone needs to be alive and for like every guild rank to kill it, basically. It like somehow perfectly scaled with gear and well, maybe it's just that everyone had the same gear. Maybe that's what
true.
I'm missing. Everyone just kind of had
Tournament realm
this
gear.
after a couple weeks, you know. Had Tourney Realm, yeah.
Speaking of gear, one question, Max, that you and I notably didn't get to ask Sarzard about in our interview with him was about Valorstones.
Oh yeah.
Which, of course, you know, we would have
We
liked
kind
to
of drapped the ball on that one.
Yeah,
we
it would
ran out
have
of
been good to
time.
ask that. We sort of half ran out of time and sort of half. I mean, we obviously could have bumped another question to fit it in there, but there was an interview that did get to Valorstones that was from But
Ooh.
Why Though, who interviewed Morgan Day and Katrina Yepes, who also did that Raider IO interview. But they interviewed those two about some general stuff and also some Valorstones. And there's a Wowhead summary from which I'm reading now, but Frank will make sure that links to all of this are available in the description and stuff of wherever you're getting this. But one of the things in there is so these are the bullet points for Valorstones. They know that Valorstones are a hot topic right now, but their focus has been on crests. Valorstones are in a weird space where they matter a lot in the early season, then you have too many late in the season when crests are limited. It's not in the healthiest place, and they can do some things in season 2. Raids will drop quite a bit more Valorstones. So it sounds like they are not, you know, they're not going to have a fix for them. They just are band-aiding it where it's like the raid bosses will drop more, which obviously if you're somebody who kills raid bosses and has had a problem with not having enough Valorstones, that will be nice for you. But the myriad of other pain points around Valorstones will continue to exist this season, which I do think is unfortunate.
Dude, just like, okay, the long-term thing, I think all of us agree is like, hey, maybe they don't make sense. Okay, cool. But in the meantime, make world quests that drop Valorstones just give you like 300 of them.
Right.
Why? What is the possible argument that they cap
Also,
at 2,000? Like
the 2,000 cap is the 2,000 cap itself. I think is kind of like if that was just a 4,000 cap or a 5,000 cap, I think also a lot of these problems would go away.
Maybe, but I think
No,
it's much more egregious that like when you actually need it, you get like these.
Yeah.
You're like a hamster getting like a drip of water instead of like.
I know, but like that is it's double frustrating when you need Valorstones and 4 days ago you had 2,000 and were capped, and you were earning Valorstones that didn't count because you were capped, and now you need them and you don't have them. Like that, to me at least, that is the feeling where like I'm gonna blow up the most.
But also, if you have 4,000 cap, then what's the point of Valorstone?
Well, you still have to earn them, and then you spend them, right? Like
Yeah, but like, you know, you'll get them gradually with crests, right? Like,
yeah, which is great. You've been doing stuff to get crests, and you do
something
stuff to get
has to
Valorstones
give.
as well.
One of the
like,
two has to give or both.
It's so bad that you're literally if they with the cap, like whenever the cap matters, it's because you were earning against the cap, and then now you're trying to upgrade and you can't. Like, does that ever really need to happen? I don't think so. I think it's like they don't want you to be able to hoard Valorstones during this first week or something like that. Like farm up to 1,000,000 D and never then worry about them. Sure, whatever. Like don't let us earn them this week and then have them be uncapped starting next week or something like that. I don't know. Like it's
yeah, maybe.
It's just so stupid that you can. It is so stupid that you can be at 2,000 Valorstones, not be hoarding, just like not have, and then get like 3 pieces that you need to upgrade, and then you're out of Valorstones, and now you don't like, and then like Max said, you look for how to get them. You look at your world quest map, and it's like 37 Valorstones for a world quest, and you need 300 to upgrade your next item.
Like I mean,
dude, the worst is when you get a side grade, right? It's like you get new hero track shoulders, and you're like, okay, poggers, and you upgrade them, and then you get hero track tertiary shoulders, and you're like, god damn it, minus 500 Valorstones, right? And it's like, it's all over. The worst day of your life.
I don't know, man. I don't play the game like you. Like I play after progression, and I like start playing my guy, and I basically just do like content to get crest, and you almost get enough Valorstones from that to keep up with the crest, at least before the crest buff. And like every now and then you run out, and I was never capped, and I was playing like hours a day, you know. I didn't do all this like rep and campaign stuff, so like definitely kind of a unique case, but I like it's just a terrible. It makes you log off. It's straight up like Blizzard. If this matters to you, it makes you log off the fucking game when you're out of Valorstones and you can't make your guy bigger without a completely realistic effort to obtain them.
So over at the he actually made a pretty good points about Valorstones. He was saying how, I mean, the point of them is so that players are incentivized to like go out and do content, right? I mean, they just need to have certain sources of Valorstones give more, and like I don't think it should be raid. It's got to be like something.
But okay,
outside of
even
raid,
then,
right?
you're basically
Incentivize players to
saying
do stuff.
by doing the content that you're already doing because you want to do it in the game, they need to give you more so you don't run out of it. Okay, why does it exist? Why is it there?
Right. Like if any time you could spend Valorstones, it involves spending crests, and the process of doing the crest gives you enough Valorstones that you don't run out of them,
what are we doing?
Then what
here?
is the point of them, right?
What are they? Why?
And if
Well,
it
it should be like,
doesn't,
you
then
should
why
be
the hell is
going
that
out
true?
to
Did
do
they answer
echoes,
that?
right? To get
Did they? They were asked this in an interview. I didn't listen to it. Did they say like, here's actually why Valorstones exist, and it made sense?
It wasn't the question. It looks like wasn't phrased that aggressively. It was more like, are there plans to improve it or something like that? But
God,
yeah, again, it's I don't think that like. So I mean, yeah, you're right, Dorky, right? Like the best source is those Radiant Echoes, and like if they want us to be doing Radiant Echoes, I guess that's okay. But it doesn't even make it clear that that's a good source of Valorstones, really. Like that, there are a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately,
who,
I think they just want you to be doing other forms of content too, like collecting Valorstones.
Yeah,
well,
they want you to be doing the stuff that doesn't give you
out.
quests, right? Like they want you to go do some Delvey Welvies or side
Yeah,
quests
yeah,
or
exactly.
some, the theater troupe stuff. Which, again, like if they think that's good, then I guess I just disagree that should be. I disagree that somebody who wants to log in and do like 10 keys should then feel like, oh man, I should only do this if I'm also willing to go and do a bunch of delves for Radiant Echoes or go and do like this world content, right?
Well, I mean, but it's the same with like raid gear, right? Like a lot of M+ers don't want to do raid if you just want the gear, but Blizzard wants you to be doing raid to get gear, and in a similar vein, they want you to be doing other forms of content out there in the world to collect Valorstones.
Yeah,
I mean,
again,
they haven't
like,
explicitly said that, but that's how I view it.
if only someone had an interview with a rewards designer and they could have asked this exact question.
Yeah,
Crazy,
we'll never know. We'll never know.
Yeah, especially if it was on podcast too.
That's true. I mean, hey, if it had been a podcast, there would have been enough time to.
That is interesting.
To certainly.
I hadn't thought about that, but that is true.
Good point. Yeah, I don't know. Again, like it's a fair point, Dorky. Right? To some extent, like the Valorstones case is a case of people complaining about feeling, forced to do stuff they don't want to do, and to some extent, the game should do that to, like you'll never do anything if there's not incentives to go and do it, right? Like that's how rewards work. Is they push you to do things, and for me, it's just a case of like Valorstones existing as this kind of universal currency, but then some sources are better than others, and those sources are the parts that I don't find fun.
Yeah.
But I don't even find them that unfun compared to most people. Again, like I suspect I've done more theater troops than 99.99999% of WoW players.
Holy, that is some confidence.
I'm reasonably confident. Like
that is an Omega casual.
You can. I did it like once per week on all of my
casual.
guys for the because it's just like, oh, it's a good source of Valorstones and some carved crests or whatever, and like and vault slots. So
what does casual mean to you, by the way? Like just in general, when someone says I play the game casually, what does that mean in your head? What pops up?
Time.
I think
people always say it's like a skill thing nowadays, but I think it's time.
Oh, I wasn't going to say skill. I was just going to say like what kinds of content they're likely to do. Like I suspect they're much more likely to be like a Mythic Plus player without a dedicated raid team, or if they do have a dedicated raid team, it's like a one night, heroic situation or one night normal situation rather than like I bet that I would say they probably don't raid Mythic.
Well, it's definitely about time. He's right about that because like that is straight up linear with skill. Like if you don't play when you play the game a lot, it turns out you're going to get a lot better at it, right? So like,
okay, hold on, but what about someone who's like a collector that plays 12 hours a day?
They're not. If you're playing WoW 12 hours a day, you're not a casual. That's.
There are definitely people that would describe themselves as casual though, that are like because like they're only doing the casual
they're
stuff.
hardcore casuals.
Yeah, exactly right, and it's like
that just sounds ridiculous.
Well, but it's because casual has like it's one of those words where it just has like 10 different.
Yeah, it can be used in like a
if we look back,
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we look back to like the original meaning back in like good old classic WoW, it literally just meant like how much time you put in the game, right? Like because
Right.
everyone had a common goal back in the good old days
Well,
where
and because
everyone was
you
like
didn't
trying to
have
get to
to,
max
right?
level
Like
and
the main thing that mattered in Classic wasn't how good you were; it was how much you played, right? Like that's
yeah.
if
Well,
you
I mean, not
if you
back in the
played for 50
days.
hours
Back then, it probably wasn't like back then. There was probably even as a game that seems as simple as Classic is now. There was probably a pretty big skill difference back then because
Yeah.
everyone sucked so bad at games. Like the general literacy of video games is so much lower.
but like the median player's skill was, the thing that would separate most people was more like how much they played rather than how.
But I mean, that's just like how it
efficient they
works.
were.
Like if you look
Yeah.
at like someone asked what do I need to do to like be in a Race World First Guild? And I used a couple of examples of people who started playing the game like actually 3 or 4 years ago, in Tobo and Hopeful basically, and it's like they just played the game all day every day for that amount of time. And also you probably have to be natural. You could do that and not be as talented as them and maybe not get as far, but you'd get way fucking better than you are right now, right? Like time and skill are very closely related.
I
I think there's also,
that,
to be fair, a lot of people who don't care about getting better. They just like play a lot for.
right, which
Yeah,
I
you
think
might
is,
not
is
even be
one of
doing
the most.
content that you can improve at. Like, how much better can you get at mount farming, right?
In fact, I would say that's probably one of the things that is most associated with being casual is like if you're the kind of player who's not playing to improve yourself as a primary goal, right? It's like you're playing to have fun, right? And like becoming better at the stuff you're doing each season over season is not a priority for you, right? Again, that's not all casual players, but I think that would be one of the through lines. I do think though that like in retail WoW compared to in classic WoW, playing a lot is definitely still necessary to being super sick, but I don't think it's like sufficient anymore. I think back in classic days, if you played a lot and you were decently, competent and able to synthesize information reasonably well and like learn things, you could become, a high warlord or whatever and Nax Raider, right? Like if you played 12 hours a day and you tried, that was probably enough. Whereas I don't think that's true anymore, right? Like I think that there are people that play a lot and try to be good and are not like your ceiling is lower if you're not like being good at learning what you should be doing, right?
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
like,
You can play the
picking
game
up
a
right
lot and
things.
not have a mindset to improve,
right?
and get totally different results than if your time you're spending in the game is like purely to improve. Like you will get, that's just how getting better at
And
anything.
obviously there were people in classic who like made literally zero effort, but I think in classic if you made like even a 10% of the effort that was maximum,
what I was just
then
thinking
you probably
about?
got it.
I don't know why this popped in my head. When do you think in WoW, like for example, everyone talks about like if you're a new player in retail WoW, one of the biggest criticisms is there's too much going on and it's too complicated. Like it's just like too much to take in at once. Don't you think that's probably how Classic felt back then when no one had ever played a game anything remotely like that?
Well, but there's nothing to compare to.
If you were playing, it was either your first MMO or you came from a much more complicated game.
Yeah,
right?
true. That's also
Like,
true.
if-
Like
if
other
you came
MMOs
from
were
EverQuest,
way more.
But I think most people, WoW got so big that I think
Yeah.
you could definitely conclude that most people did not come from a more complicated
But
game.
nobody
They were
came
brand
from
new
an
gamers.
easier. Nobody came from like an easier MMO to WoW, right? Like WoW was your first MMO,
Or was their first game.
or was
yeah.
your first game, or it was an easier MMO than what you played. Whereas now,
I mean,
WoW is a
it was
harder
pretty well
game.
known back then that World of Warcraft was like the Care Bear MMO. That's what they
Right.
called it back then. It was
Yeah.
like the casual MMO, and nowadays,
Okay, but
Maybe
the thing
it's not
is
exactly
that
true.
WoW blew up gaming so much that like I think the amount of people that were playing classic WoW, that number absolutely dwarfed anyone else playing MMOs before that point. Like that's only if you came from other MMOs. Like that was so many people introduction into PC gaming or just gaming in general that I would bet, for that player, which you can't say all players were that player, but I would bet you're just in WoW, you're just like, what the fuck is going on? Maybe just like you are now, but that wasn't what I was going to ask. I was going to ask at what point in retail that wasn't the case. Like basically at what point in history would you have actually played WoW and it's like, okay, I've played games before. This is a game that makes sense and it's not like this massive different thing you have to learn.
Well, I kind of think that it's easier to play a super complicated game if it is like your first game, rather than if you've had some experience playing more user-friendly games, right? Like
that's
if
interesting.
you're in the 1920s and you're like, I want to learn how to drive a car, right? And then all the cars are like, you got to like learn how a car actually works and like have like a 10-step automobile manual. to
Dude,
get
what the fuck?
thing
That's
started.
okay. What kind of argument are you making? If
I
you
see
gave
what
people
you're saying,
automatic,
but
if you
I
gave
don't know.
people
Here's what I'm saying.
automatic cars back then, they would be cruising in fucking 10 minutes.
They
What do you
would,
mean?
but because they didn't have access to that, everybody thought that the F-150 was cool and easy to use, right? Because they didn't
I see
know
where
any
you're
better.
cooking,
'Cause
but
they
I
didn't
feel like
have-
this is
they didn't
not
have access
true.
to automatic.
Oh, I kind of see what
Whereas
you're saying.
nowadays, right? Nowadays, everybody has, you could go and play Fortnite, which will hold your hand beautifully well into getting into the game, right? Or Diablo 4. You can play Diablo 4 and like get eased into a nice gaming experience, right? Or you can play WoW, which is the Ford F-150 next to the modern cars, right? And like that, by comparison now, it's not like,
You're
oh,
seeing
this is an
relatively,
automobile.
yeah.
Wow, this is better than a horse and carriage, right? It's like, oh man, this is an automobile. It's worse than, a Prius or whatever modern car I can get. I don't know why I use Prius for that example, but I think there is some element of that. I'm not sure that explains the whole story, but I do think that's part of it. Why WoW, even though it was more complicated, was like more accepted for being sort of fiddly back then, because like there just wasn't a lot of non-fiddly games you could play.
It was also just the best game in the world by a lot.
Right.
I think that also helps.
Yeah. Whereas now it's like
That's not
the best
true
game
now.
in the world. By
Well, I
a
mean, it's
small
totally
amount.
subjective. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I have more fun playing any kind of PvE combat in WoW more than any other game in the world. It is just, there's nothing in the world that beats doing that in a group of people doing that with a group of people you enjoy. But I think it'd be hard pressed to be like, this is the best game. It is not true.
Yeah. Okay.
Wait, so what was the initial question that Max was asking?
Oh, Frank, before we go to the Patreon question, I need you to blur out the part where Dorky started some fucking sentence with like, someone said something good on the bench. And then he continued that sentence. Just remove everything associated with that. But what I was saying was like, I don't know, just popped into my head that I'm like, I actually tried to get someone into retail recently that wanted to get into it. And my head was spinning, trying to explain to them how to do it. And I hopefully should be good at that. I was not, it's just really hard. And there's a lot going on. And I bet in Classic, anyone would have had that exact same experience with anyone else trying to play that game for the first time as well, especially because just like general video game literacy is just so much less than it is in 2025. So I just wonder, basically, if there was ever a point in WoW where they had a good user experience and general video game literacy was high enough to where it would have been easy to get into it. It's a really weird theoretical question that there is really no answer to. It's just interesting to think about.
Yeah, my theory can be summed down to no, the WoW was never like that. There was just a time when it could get away with it without getting called on it, and that's no longer true.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay, Patreon question. Let's do the Patreon question.
Yep.
This one comes from Brian G. I like this first name last initial thing because it reminds me of Severance.
Yeah, very good.
This one from Brian G, who says, "Hello, the good version of the bench. Long-time listener, first-time caller here. Picture this: you're 82 on your deathbed, so not far in our futures. You've gone senile, right now, some would say, and your family is desperately trying to connect with you, but you don't seem to care at all. You're lost daydreaming about your prime back when you played World of Warcraft. With this picture in mind, my question is, which WoW memory are you looking back on the most fondly? Is it a specific memory? Is it the teamwork that got you to where you are? Is it depleting Siege of Morales while keeping other podcasters waiting?
That was such a good moment.
All answers are valid, Podios. That's a good question.
It's super easy.
I mean, that's an easy one.
Easy.
Yeah.
As fuck.
I bet yours is a Nazoth.
I mean, I don't even know if it would even be a specific boss. It's just the fact that, like, right now, this is true. This is actually going to happen in a few days. Some fucking person or entity of people is going to pay me and my friends a bunch of money and give us a private chef to go to, like, a facility and play games together for a couple weeks. That's our life, right? Like, you get caught up in doing this, but it is not lost on me, at least, that 20 years from now, even before I'm senile, hopefully, right, I will be like, that it's insane that I was able to do that. We were able to do that. Like, winning is awesome, but the fact that even existed at all is fucking sick. That's what I look back on.
Yeah, for me, it would definitely be the MDI situation where we played our first MDI and beat Echo in cups, and then came back to streaming.
Gone so crazy, yeah.
Yeah, that was really hype.
Yeah, I remember that week. You guys were like, you guys were heroes of the region for like a whole month after that. It was,
Oh yeah, for like many reasons too, because it's like,
yeah,
well, for one, we're just like a streamer team, and nobody really expected a whole lot out of us. It's like, oh, it's some group of high key players doing keys for the first time or doing MDI for the first time, and we just also like that was like the first time we took a massive break from streaming. We were like literally just going hard in the hyperbolic time chamber for I don't know, like a month and a half or so. So it was just like a lot put into it, and a lot came out of it. And there was like nothing more satisfying than getting that feeling.
hell yeah. Yeah, for me, I mean, I could think of some boss kills like playing WoW that have been pretty memorable for me. Um, that like bosses like Fyrak even that just it felt like my guild and we had progressed well and killed the boss quickly and we're really happy about it. But I definitely for me the favorite part is also like getting paid to go to you know events with a private chef and talk about World of Warcraft on a couch. As a profession is also it's also not lost on me that that's like a uniquely good setup in for me in terms of like it's all just like in human history. It's lucky that I was born at a time when that's possible because I doubt I would have had as much fun being a serf in the 1500s or whatever. So it's pretty awesome. All right, cool. Anything else besides stuff we've already talked about that you guys would like to cover today? Anything we missed? Any points you guys would like to revisit? Going once? Going twice?
No.
All right, that's going to be it then for our PoddyC this week. We will be back possibly next week. Me and Dorki might figure something out. But almost certainly we're not going to have Max for until the race is over. That would be my strong suspicion. And we may.
You might. I'm finding out like why I didn't talk for the last minute. I'm finding out that like my stuff can't be at the facility until like hilariously close to the race because of some dumb content shit. So I can probably film more stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I mean we'll have some bonus stuff up on the Patreon as well. So do check that out if you want some more. We'll record that. Have some stuff there pre-planned, but yeah, again, just as we move into the race, things are going to be a little bit unpredictable. So, but yeah, thanks so much for watching, all the beautiful listeners and patrons and stuff. And we'll see you when we see you. Adios.
Adios.
Adios.